Johann. All right. I understand. You understand what? The Smurf language. It's really simple. You just have to replace the nouns with Smurf and the verbs with to Smurf. You think it's that easy? Of course. You'll see. I'm going to ask this Smurf to bring us something to eat. Listen up. Hey, Smurf. Huh? Little Smurf. I'd really like to Smurf. Oh, okay. You see? It's no more difficult than that. Here. No, come on now. I told you that I wanted to Smurf. Well, this here is for Smurfing. No, to Smurf. In my mouth? Like that, you understand? Yum, yum. To Smurf. Huh? To eat. That's what. Ah, to Smurf. Good grief. That's what I told you just now. No, you said to Smurf. Well, yeah, I said to Smurf. And you meant to say to Smurf. But that's what I said. To Smurf. No, I said to Smurf, but you said to Smurf. If you want to Smurf, you must say to Smurf, and not to Smurf. To Smurf is not Smurfing. Do you Smurf? Ha 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 ha, tra-la-la-la, sim-boom. One of my first encounters with the Smurfs as figures in pop culture came from the song What If Cartoons Got Saved? An interesting relic of the 1990s in which the singer hypothesizes what various cartoon characters would sound like if they had a born-again religious experience and converted to evangelical Christianity. You get things like Scooby-Doo would say Scooby-Dooby-Doo-ya, Beavis and Butthead, well, they don't even say the word Butthead because that's too offensive, and they say, nah, they're beyond redemption. The Flintstones, Yabba Dabba Doo, yeah, on and on. But of course, the Smurfs in this song, they sing tra la 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 hallelujah. And then, of course, the guy who sang that song was outed as a sexual predator in the 2010s during the Me Too movement. So, not great, but that is one of the first encounters that I have with the Smurfs as figures. Later on, I would go on to watch the Smurfs cartoon that this song was referencing. But what I didn't know at the time, and I assume many of you might not have known as well, is that the Smurfs were in fact based off of a comic. Not only that, a French or maybe Franco-Belgian comic. I believe it's Les Smurfs. Interestingly enough, sorry for my French pronunciation there, but it's a made-up word, so how could I mispronounce it? Riddle me that, French speakers. Anyways, the Smurfs were created by cartoonist Peyo, which is a pseudonym. They originally debuted not in a Smurfs comic, but in a Johann and Smit, which was a feature in the Spirou magazine, which is one of the more popular French magazines at the time. And I guess they were just so popular that they eventually got their own series, which took off and became the multimedia franchise we know in today. But what is that initial seed, that source comic that went on to inspire so much, from the animated series to a series of movies featuring, I think Rihanna is in them, and then, the song that is written by a sexual predator. Well, we're not going to talk about that anymore. I promise we're going to focus on the comics, and we're going to talk about if they are any good. If this is your first time to my channel, Divine Comics, I'd like to extend to you a gracious welcome. My name is Steven, but you might better know me by my superhero alter ego, Spike Stonehand. And here I dig through comics from across the globe and across time in order to better understand my knowledge of the breadth and depth of the medium. In fact, I have a 52 comics challenge going on where I'm trying to read 52 comics in 52 weeks from all over the history and the breadth and depth of the medium. And so cover comics from France, from Japan. We're going to cover stuff from Africa, South America, American comics, obviously. As many things from, as early as comics in the 1930s and even before, with some newspaper print comics to today. So if you'd like to join me on that journey, you can do so in several ways. First, you can like this video, subscribe to my channel. That boosts me in the algorithm and make sure that you never miss an update from my channel. You can find a full description of all 52 categories, and you can read your own comics comics. Choose your own, like the Criterion Challenge. In the description of this video, they'll have a link to all of that. You can find my writing over at spikestonehand.com. I have weekly new comics buyer's guide. I have links to other interesting comics news, podcasts, YouTubes, things that you might find of value. Finally, you can support me over on Patreon. Throw me a couple bucks and get your name thrown in at the end of this video. Finally, comment below with what your favorite Smurf is, which Smurf you think you would be. Unfortunately, I must admit, and this is going to sound egotistical, but once you read the comments, you'll understand, I think that I'm Brainy Smurf, and not because I'm smart, but because I'm incredibly annoying. But without further ado, I'd like to extend to you a gracious welcome to my channel, Divining Comics, where I explore the magic hidden between the panels of your favorite comics.
Boys and girls, your attention, please. Presenting a new exciting radio program featuring the thrilling adventures of an amazing and incredible personality.
So, like I mentioned before, the Smurfs debut in a series that is not a Smurfs focus series. It's some sort of fantasy series called Johann and Schmidt, and there are two princes in this kingdom, and the particular issue that they debuted in, the magic flute. They discover a magic flute that when you play it, it makes people dance. And a villain gets his hand on this flute and is going to use it for his own financial gain. The boys find out that this magic flute was made by the Smurfs, a strange race of woodland creatures that you can only visit in their faraway land by falling asleep and waking up through, kind of psychic projection to their homeland. They get the Smurfs to build them a magic flute. They defeat the villain. Easy enough, right? It's a simple story, and here they're kind of more this strange group of fairies almost, right? It's not really a proper Smurf story in that sense, but I guess they were really popular. They get their own kind of comics and series here, albums as they might call them, over in Europe. And this volume that I read from Paper Cuts collects a number of their early graphic novels. I believe there's 3 of the Paper Cuts 60-page graphic novels that have 2 or 3 stories in them in this volume that I read. So I read a fair number of these early Smurf stories. No Smurfette, unfortunately. That was before I guess that character was conceived. So a lot of the Smurfs do feel kind of bland, one note. I feel like Smurfette really throws in an interesting dynamic that was not present here. These comics, one must say, do not pass the Bechdel test. There is I guess they don't with Smurfette either because she's the only woman, but these have 0 women in them. I guess all the Smurfs are male-coded, and for better, but mostly for worse. I'm just going to lay my cards out on the table. I really did not like these Smurfs comics. I'm sorry if you're a Smurfs fan out there. I always love trying to find these hidden gems, old stuff, and I'm a defender of a lot of old comics. I think a lot of people complain that they're hard to read, they're too wordy, the panels are too dense, and I think that all of these can be valid critiques, though I do think that they are overstated by people that maybe have a diet solely consisting of manga or more recent American, Marvel and DC comics. I think that comics can do a lot more than just those modes, and I love finding things that do that well, but I do not think these Smurfs do that well. And it's not just the complaint that I might normally levy that, well, these are meant for kids and I'm not a kid anymore, because I've just come off of reading one of the greatest kid comics I've ever read in The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. Tintin, even though I had plenty of critiques, was a lot of fun. There were a lot of cool moments in Tintin, and the art was phenomenal. Here, there just was so little that I actually enjoyed. The first story in it, The Purple Smurf, interestingly enough, was edited for the American release because it was initially the black Smurf, right? And there was a fly that would bite the Smurfs, turn them from blue to black, and they would become evil and full of hate. And it looked kind of like a racial caricature of blackface. And I don't know what it says about comics that there's now 3 weeks in a row in these adventure comics and now into French comics where characters are interacting with racially offensive stereotypes of black people. That's a conversation that we should continue to be having here. But it's not a great look. So for the American release, they changed them to purple instead of black. It changes now to purple Smurfs. Let's just sidestep the optical issue without ever addressing some of the underlying critiques there. That's a strategy for sure. But in these early stories, all of the Smurfs are indistinguishable. They could be replaced one for the other, and even when they have later on a single note, not a personality, just a single character trait, like, oh, this guy plays the trumpet. That's his whole deal. He plays the trumpet. Oh, this guy's lazy. I guess that's getting on almost a character, but it's not enough to make a main character, right? This is maybe enough for a gag, but it's not enough for something that is of interest, of note. I think of, as a point of comparison, the Minions. The Minions are everywhere these days, folks. Who doesn't love the Minions, right? I don't really love the Minions, but they're popular for a reason, right? In the first movie, in Despicable Me, that they're in, most of them don't really have set personalities at this point. They're pretty interchangeable. By the time that they get their own movies and their own spin-offs, you get a few Minions with some personality, some unique designs, some interesting character traits, and bits that they like to do, because you need that in order to tell a story. The Smurfs don't have that. They don't have any interesting character. They don't have any interesting personality. They're kind of just set dressing. This is like, imagine a newspaper gag comic, but instead of being done in 4 panels, it's done in, 12 panel pages for 20 pages. It's kind of absurd. Just how tiresome this gets so quickly. He empowers the other Smurfs to be his personal military. They attack the other Smurfs. They arrest their political opponents, throw them in jail, and some Smurfs decide to form a rebellion. They fight against their new leader, destroy the village. Papa Smurf comes back, and everybody, says, "Oh, we're so sorry. We feel bad about it." And Douglas Wolk has a quote at the end of this volume saying, "Wow, this is this subversive political masterpiece." And I, no offense to Mr. Wolk, but I have no idea what he's talking about. I found this incredibly tedious. It's the kind of point that is made infinitely better by Animal Farm, specifically because of a recurring problem that I have throughout this. Stories that I read, which is that it is paced so poorly. You get the same gag told over and over again on these 12 panel pages for 2 or 3 pages in a row. The Smurf doesn't like how loud his neighbor's being, and so you get, okay, he doesn't like his neighbor for blowing the trumpet. He doesn't like his neighbor that's banging pots and pans. He doesn't like this neighbor for being loud for this way. This neighbor gets in arguments, this whatever. And the joke doesn't build on itself. It doesn't get interesting in any way. It just repeats itself over and over again, and this is true through all these stories. I find them paced the way that like a newspaper comic would be, but instead of ending the gag after 4 panels, they just keep going on and on and on for pages. It's just not for me. And then similarly, the kind of gag that wears its welcome out very quickly is the Smurf language. They use Smurf for noun and Smurf for verb and Smurf for adverb, and I'm Smurfing tired of it. It's a joke that wears itself very thin very quickly, in my opinion, and overstays its welcome for sure. I was not a fan of these comics, as you can tell, but wrapping things up, would I continue reading them? No, I think the answer is no. Maybe if you're a big Smurf fan and you want to tell me, oh, this one with Smurfette later on, this one with Gargamel, maybe it's a little more interesting, and I'd be willing to listen. I don't know if I'd follow up on your recommendation and actually read it, but I'd listen to what you had to say. Who would I recommend this for? Children that haven't developed taste, I guess. Maybe, an adult that struggles to understand themes unless it's pounded into their head over and over and over again without any subtlety. I'm being mean, but that's what this comic made me feel, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how I feel right now. So let's try to keep things positive a little bit. Tell me in the comments, what are some of your comics that you've been reading recently that you really love and fill you with joy and happiness? I have many of them. Check out Mafalda. It's an Argentinian classic gag comic. Cute little girl. It's like their Nancy. You're getting English translations for the first time. And I'm going to be covering it later this year. Get a head start. Check out Mafalda. Who doesn't love cute little girls being silly and giving biting, scathing political satire? That's what you get when you read Mafalda. But until next time, keep reading comics. Keep reading good comics. And never let the magic of comics die.
Old Enoch, he lived to be 365 when the Lord came and took him back to heaven alive. I saw the light from heaven shining all around. I saw the light come shining I saw that light come down